Hello and welcome back to Faith for Dummies. Hi Rob, how are you?
Hi Izzy, hi everyone. Yeah, I'm good. I am good, but I didn't have a very good night's sleep last night because of a 3-year-old, but there you go. That's okay.
It's part of being a parent, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. How are you anyway?
Yeah, I'm really well, thanks. Having a good day. Managed to wake up early, which is probably the opposite of what you wanted to do today. So.
Yeah, well, I wonder how your early compares to my early, so...
Okay, I woke up at 6, which is very early for me.
Oh, that is early. To be fair, our kids on the whole are quite good at sleeping in for kids. So I got up at 7 this morning.
Nice. That's good.
Nice.
Rob, have you got any dummy moments this week?
I do, yes. I went to the post office yesterday to send off some important documents for our baby's passport. And as I did, I got there and the envelope was slightly open. And so I said, can I send this off, please? But can I also just have a bit of tape to tape it down because the envelope's old and it's just kind of coming open a bit. And she said, we don't actually have any tape that you can tape it with, but you're welcome to buy some from us and then use it. I said, oh, okay, how much is it? She said £3. I was like, £3 for some tape? No, thanks. I was like, okay, I'm just going to go to Aldi next door to buy some tape and then I'll come back. And she's like, yeah, fine, okay. And so I went into Aldi. I looked for some tape. I then went back to the post office, queued up, saw the same lady, and she said, hello. And I said, hello, please can I buy your £3 tape because they didn't have any. To which she said, she laughed and was like, yeah, of course. So, yeah, just a little one.
So you wasted 10 minutes and you had to spend £3.
Yep, that's exactly what happened.
Do you know what? You just reminded me of a dummy moment that I did, which was I had to go to the post office the other day, posted like 5 or 6 gifts for people, got home and realised the reason I'd gone to the post office in the first place was a parcel that I had left at home. So, you know, we're all dummies this week. Right, Rob, what are we talking about this week?
Well, this week we are talking about money, and kind of lots of things that come under that, like what does it mean to be rich, maybe? What does the Bible say about money and the love of money? Can a Christian be rich? All of these things we're going to hopefully touch on a little bit. And just before we get into the episode talking about money, just want to say quite clearly and obviously at the start that we're not experts. We're not telling you what to do. We're just talking about some opinions and some thoughts that we had. So please don't take what we're saying as instructions for what you should do and get some good conversations going. Yeah, what do you think, Izzy?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe just use this episode as a conversation starter with someone that you trust. As with everything we talk about on these podcasts, we are just 2 people in a very big world of people who you might know better. So take this episode, share it with somebody, and maybe start this conversation with them if you want to. So,
Izzy, any initial thoughts?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this episode earlier today and this week, and was really thinking about if we're going to do a podcast episode about money, what is it that people want to know? And I think sometimes it's the more divisive questions. For me, growing up as a Christian, kind of late teens, early 20s, when I started earning money was, can I be a Christian and have more money than I need? What does that look like? And I think I kind of had this mindset of like, you can't be a Christian and have lots of money because that's just not a Christian. And any Christian who has lots of money isn't a real Christian. And I kind of lived like that for a while. So it's really interesting to me to kind of ask these questions. And I guess the first question I was asking was, what does it actually mean to be rich? Like, what do we mean when we say someone who's rich?
Yeah.
What do you think when you think of somebody rich? What do you think of?
I mean, simply, I think it's someone who has a lot of money, either in the bank or has a lot of possessions, probably houses, really, as it owns a lot of houses.
Yeah, I do agree. I think that's the picture, isn't it? Like somebody like with like wads of cash in their pocket or like massive numbers on their bank account and that kind of thing. I think in the more recent years, to be really boring, for me it's also been just financial security, like not having to check how much money you have before you go and buy something. And I don't know about you, like we're not going to discuss our financial states here, but you know, I still check my money, like my Monzo app, before I go out for dinner with somebody, and like, you know, sometimes you have to do that awkward thing at a shop where you're like, hang on, I just need to move some money over, and I think to not have to think about that, to me, signifies somebody who is rich. And it doesn't always mean that at all.
Yeah.
But I think that's what I think of as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's good. I've already said rich, like lots of money, but actually it probably doesn't really mean lots of money only, does it?
Yeah, I also think sometimes people can have a really wealthy front, they can live a wealthy lifestyle but not actually have much money. I mean, like, you know, credit cards, or maybe being married to somebody who's wealthy, like they can all kind of give this front of, or even just, you know, somebody else gives you a designer bag as a gift maybe, or like a really nice car is passed down to you from your parents, and then it looks from the outside like you're really rich, and actually, you know, some people have got cars on like credit finance loans and stuff, and you just look at it and think that's a really expensive car, they must be really rich, and actually it sometimes just doesn't mean that at all. And then some people who have loads of money in the bank are driving like really old, you know, Ford Fiestas or whatever, and that's just not where they want to put their money. So I find it really interesting.
I once watched an interview of two people who won the lottery. One won £1 million, one won £6 million. They both said they still shopped at Aldi. Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I'd choose Lidl, but I see why.
Yeah.
I guess I kind of landed on being rich is like having more than you need, whether that's actual money or possessions and kind of wealth. I think it's having more than you need. And then I guess the question, can a Christian be rich, could be changed to, can a Christian have more than they need? Is it okay for a Christian to be living with more than they need, more money than they need, more disposable income, so like spending money, more, you know, a bigger house than they need, more land than they need, more cars than they need? Like, is that okay to live with more than we need as Christians?
It's a good question, isn't it? And I think it's something that if you're in that position or similar to that, you're going to constantly be thinking about it, constantly just be critiquing it, really. And as you go along and just thinking about it differently, I think, yes. I mean, ultimately, can you be a Christian and rich in whatever sense? Yes, of course you can, because what does it mean to be a follower of Jesus? It means to love him and change your life as a result of that, to be more like him. And as a result, you might have to think about money a bit more and think what you're going to do about it. But yes, I think you can still be a Christian and rich, because there's, in a way, it's got nothing to do with that. I tell you what, Izzy, I used to think, I wish God would make me win the lottery or make me a millionaire, because you know what? I'd give loads of money to church. I'd give money to Christian charities like that. What I was doing was I was justifying me having left over and me being rich by saying I would give money to church and charities anyway. When the simple answer would be, well, give money to church and charities with the money you have anyway, and God can just cut out the middleman and not give me it.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you mean, because I would think, well, you know, if I'm going to give 10% of what I earn to the church or to charity or whatever, which is often the kind of number that we're, you know, told to give, then if I've got £1 million, 10% is nothing. Great. Whereas, like, you know, if I'm not earning very much, then 10% is quite a lot. So it's still 10%, but actually you'd have a lot left over if you were earning a lot more money.
Exactly.
You know, I think for me, I've really wrestled with this over the years, and it's a very strange thing to say as someone who has never been particularly wealthy, to kind of give you a bit of a insight. Like, I grew up with two parents who both worked and had, you know, very decent paying jobs, and you know, I was so lucky as a kid, never really wanted for anything. We were not like super wealthy by any means, but my parents each had a car, we went on holiday once a year, we had a great life. And then I moved out and I became a youth worker in a church, which, by the way, guys, doesn't really pay very well. So, you know, my church are brilliant, and they obviously support me and love me, but working for a church, working in youth work, it isn't the big bucks. And so I've then had to really think about money, and I've got less disposable income now than I've ever had before, and I think I'm more likely to idolise my money now than I ever have.
Yeah.
And I find that really intriguing, that sometimes actually when we have less money, we're really likely to idolise that, or to think about it a lot more. And I don't mean, when you're scrambling to pay for food, that's not what I mean, but when you have enough, you have just enough, sometimes you think about it even more.
Yeah, I agree. When it comes to tithing for churches, you and I obviously both work for a church, and so we had this conversation in our cell group the other month, and we're talking about whether the money I get paid from church should be tithed and go back to church. I was just wondering, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. I think it's up to the individual, obviously. Yeah. I think, for me, whatever I'm earning, obviously I need to be able to like pay the rent and stuff, but there is always something I could give. There is always something. So for me, it might be 10%. And I actually split that between a couple of different charities and my church. So I do give back to my church. Yeah. But I also think it's completely reasonable to say the church is paying me, and so I'm going to tithe to something else. Yeah. Because, but actually our church tithes its money as well. So if I'm giving back to the church, then I could even just kind of say in my head, my portion of money that I'm giving back to the church is what's going out of the church. So it can feel like you're paying yourself, but actually you can just, in your head, you can be like, this is the money for the work of this thing in the church.
Yeah. It's just interesting. Lots of people have lots of opinions. I think the whole important thing about this all is our attitude to money. And a few, I don't know, years ago or whatever, I think I was challenged on this, and the money I'm given is not my money. I shouldn't see it as my money, but I should see it as God's money. I mean, if I see it as God's money, I'm much more likely to be generous and just looking after it. Where can this money go? Which Christian charities, always charities am I hearing about, which I think, they're asking for some money. How can I support them by giving them some money? So
in terms of like what life is like at the moment for teenagers, young people, obviously for us as well, we're not that young anymore, in terms of money, what do we think that looks like at the moment? What sorts of things might people listening to this podcast be thinking about when we say the word money?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think the cost of living crisis, as they call it, is affecting teenagers, perhaps not directly, but maybe it's affecting their parents, and then it's going to be affecting them through secondary actions as well. Lots of young people have jobs or online businesses, which weren't really a thing when we were young. Yeah.
I mean, even just things like Vinted didn't really exist when we were young. Yeah. And I think as a teenager now, if you want to make a quick fiver, you could probably just sell something on Vinted, or like if you have a skill that you can sell, there's a chance you could sell that on like Instagram or something, or TikTok or whatever. And I find that so intriguing, because that just didn't exist when we were young. Like if we wanted to earn money, we had to like go down to the newsagents and get a paper round, and obviously people still do that. But I think
your age there.
I think it's I know. I think it's really cool that you can now you can do those things now, and I would have loved that kind of thing when I was younger.
Yeah.
We were also thinking, weren't we, about like how social media kind of affects the way that we think about money now, and how it really glamorizes stuff. And I remember being young and getting magazines, because I'm so old, and you would see the way that celebrities lived, and you might be jealous of it or whatever, but it would be such a different world, because they were the people in the magazines, they were famous singers and stuff. But like nowadays, social media, I think, must be really, really hard to see that as a teenager and think, gosh, that life of that influencer, that's what I should be aiming for. Yeah. And they're, wearing designer stuff or using expensive skincare and makeup, and like, I need to aim for that. That must be quite hard.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be hard when you have lots of targeted ads on you at social media. As well as like what you said about with magazines, you're going to a shop, you're buying it, you use the magazine, however much you use it, but it's much more likely that we're on our smartphones more, and on social media as well more, so the exposure is greater, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes you really don't even know you're being targeted, and then suddenly you're buying really expensive skincare or really expensive, I don't know, I'm not a boy, what do boys buy?
I don't know.
But or really expensive technology, like you absolutely have to have the newest iPhone, because that's going to give you the best social media pictures. And I think, not that everybody is like that, obviously, but sometimes we don't even know we're being influenced by something, or maybe the people around us are influenced by it, and we feel left out, that we can't afford that, or we don't know why we need that. I just think it's just so much harder not to be influenced by other people and not to see everybody's highlight reel and their most expensive things all the time.
Yeah, and I guess it can cause such a friction maybe between friends, perhaps. Like if one person has got their own job and they're saving because they want to go to university, or they want to learn to drive and spend their money on driving lessons, and they've got friends who are fortunate, and they've got parents who can help them out with that, and they don't need to go and work at the pub for a couple of hours just so they can go eat at McDonald's with them. And it might, hopefully it doesn't cause friction, but it can be hard. The comparison can be hard to deal with, and that's just what it's like sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And your friends are always able to go to the cinema, are always able to go shopping, and you can't do that, and that is really tricky. And I have a friend who now would say growing up she just found that so hard to know how to be involved in stuff that other friends were doing, because she just couldn't afford it. So how are you supposed to keep up with your friends if you can't even afford the bus into town? It must be really hard.
And with everything going up as well, that's not helping really, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the question is whether you get an allowance, or you have a job, or you just don't really have much money at all, but you sell something on Vinted and you earn a £5. Like, how do you use that money in a godly way? Because earlier we were talking about tithing, we were talking about salaries, we were talking about that kind of thing. But even if your money is really, really small, how could we maybe start to think about that in a godly way?
Yeah, it's really good. I think wherever you are, whatever age you are, if you have a online bank account and can do that, I would really encourage you chatting to your parents about maybe setting up a little standing order to your church or a charity. Mostly, to be honest with you, to get into the habit of it, okay? Because you might not have a lot of money, you might not be able to do a lot of money, but maybe like 50p, maybe £1 a month, if that's where you start, brilliant, like good for you. But actually that really helps with your attitude and your humility, but also into a really good habit for when you're older to be generous with your money, to be able to give it away. That's something that I thought of. What about you, Izzy?
Yeah, and I will say on that, just in case GDPR safeguarding people listen to this, we're not telling you to give money to our specific churches. But Rob's just talking about the heart behind that, giving money to a charity or to your own church if that's where you feel led. But that heart of giving, I think you said earlier, like just having that heart of this money is God's, not mine.
Yeah.
And actually, however I've acquired it, whether it was a gift from my parents, whether it was an allowance from a job that I'm able to do because God's given me the skills, or anything like that, or an inheritance or something, actually, what would it look like to ask God what to do with this money? And sometimes that might be just this little feeling when you go out with your friends that actually maybe your friend can't afford things, and you could just say, hey, this McDonald's on me, by the way, I really would love to just treat you because I care about you. Or it might be someone comes to speak at your church, or you hear about a charity online, and you're like, oh, I really, really care about that thing. I would love to give £1 a month to those people. And I think you're totally right. It's just the tiniest thing. It's just saying, before I spend this money on myself, God, where could I bless somebody else with that? I was really, really amazed by one of our young people when the war in Ukraine started, and there were lots of appeals for money, and he had some savings that he got from various things, and he gave quite a big chunk of those savings to help a charity that was helping. And wow. I was so amazed by him because I hadn't even thought about it. Yeah. And for me, I was like, I've already got my standing orders going out to my church, to these charities, and obviously, I feel for these people and I'm praying for them, but I hadn't even really considered, could I give a chunk of my money away? I was so amazed by that, and that really blessed me to hear that story as well. So obviously we're not shouting about what we're doing from the rooftops and trying to be better than everybody else, but actually what an encouragement that he saw a need and he gave to that. So yeah, absolutely. Just kind of thinking before you spend that money.
What does the Bible have to say about all this, Izzy?
Yeah, there's a lot in the Bible, I think, about money. Sometimes I think the Bible is very misquoted on money. So a phrase that you might hear often is money is the root of all evil, which is a misquoted Bible quote. I mean, so misquoted, I think it's become its own quote, really. But it actually says in 1 Timothy 6, the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Essentially, it's not just money that is the only evil thing, but also it's not money itself that's evil, it's loving money, it's idolising money, it's making money your god, basically. Yeah. And so a rich man can have a lot of money and not idolise or love that money, and he can be using that for godly purposes. And actually somebody who doesn't really have much, who has a spare £10 a week to spend on themselves, can be really idolising that money and being really selfish with it. And so actually it's our attitude towards that money that I think God particularly cares about. We also have in Luke 12, there's a story where the person is basically told to not be greedy, to be on your guard against being greedy. And again, like that feeling of having enough and wanting more for yourself in a selfish way. And that might not even be money, that might be stuff. Proverbs 3 talks about honouring the Lord with your wealth, so using your money for God's purposes. Yeah. And one of, I think, the simplest stories about money is in Acts 2, when they have started the kind of first churches. Acts 2 just talks about how they lived in community and shared whatever they had.
I think
and we really don't live like that anymore.
Yeah, I think it says in that, doesn't it, that no one went without.
Yeah, absolutely. And even just last night I was talking to some friends about how everyone I know in the area that I live in has a house with at least one spare bedroom in it. And how many homeless people are there in our city that don't have a bed to sleep in? Now, I'm not saying open your doors to anyone who walks past. Like, we've got to be wise about these things. But actually just thinking about our money, thinking about our generosity. Do we have much more than we need? And could we be generous with what we have? And kind of create a community where actually people aren't going without, because the people that have more are able to support the people that have less. Yeah,
exactly. And that early church, what an example, like, for church and Christian living. I think you're right with that quote. The love of money is a root for all kinds of evil. Yeah, it's just really interesting, and it's something that I think we're just going to keep on coming back to. And you might be thinking, how is this relevant for me as a teenager? But you might have a couple of quid lying around or whatever, but it can also be used for our attitude as well. So
yeah, I was going to say, like, a challenge for this week could be about giving, and what can you give this week, and maybe that is something you feel led to do. But I actually wonder if the challenge this week needs to just be to spend some time, if you're a Christian or if you're not, talking to God about what does it look like, God, for me to be generous. And you might be sitting there with thousands of pounds in a savings pot in your bank, and God may stir you towards using that money, and you might be sat there with absolutely no money to your name, and God might stir your heart to be generous in a different way. But actually just sitting and spending time and kind of talking to God about, how can I be generous with what you've given me in order to bless others before I'm kind of selfish with that. I wonder if, that's something I definitely need to do every month when I get paid. Too. I really have to think, how can I be generous this month? So yeah, maybe that's the challenge this week. What do you think?
Yeah, good challenge. Cool.
Great. So I know we could have said so much more about money there. Feel free to message in, and we can always do another episode if you want to go further into that. But what are we looking at next week, Rob?
Yeah, so next week I have interviewed one of my previous young people called Daniel and asked him all about his testimony. So feel free to come back. No, not feel free. Do come back. Come back and have a listen.
You will come back.
You will. Well, I can't make you, but come back and have a listen to what he has to share, because it's really interesting. He doesn't come from a Christian family, and I'm just grateful for the time and the effort that he shared, and I just found it really interesting and really encouraging, getting to play just a little part alongside his journey in that. So yeah, Daniel's testimony next week.
Great. See you next week, Rob.
See you next week. Bye, Izzy. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.